Y mi al final me lo botaba y venía que yo me vine porque nosotros teníamos que comer.
Children are one of the most important pillars of society. They represent the future of our nations and are moldable entities. Boys, girls, and adolescents are subjects of international law and public international law. They enjoy guarantees that ensure their integrity and dignity wherever they are.
The border between Mexico and the United States is one of the most talked about in Latin America, and possibly globally, due to the humanitarian crises that are taking place there. Migratory exoduses from Central America, as well as human rights violations, are cross-border problems that must be managed to provide a solution.
The rights of these children are human rights, and they are also part of the migrant waves that arrive in Tijuana. For this reason, it is important to speak of them and the violation of their rights. As a minority, they must be protected and respected. So today we present violations of the rights of the children on the border between Mexico and the U.S.
Before starting to talk about the subject, it is important to know the historical background on the rights of the child at the international level and how they have influenced current legislation on the rights of the migrant child.
In the middle of the 18th century, children were seen as mini adults, for which they had the same responsibilities as their elders and had to work in order to survive. Rousseau was one of the pioneers in thinking that the infant had a different status and therefore should be taught differently.
Thus, little by little, the international community questioned the role of children in the communities. Science cared more about them, and thanks to this, the infant mortality rate dropped dramatically. Parents now care more for the welfare of their children.
Now, we fast forward to the 18th century, where the defunct League of Nations and the United Nations began to draft specific international conventions to defend children from global conflicts. France, Germany, Belgium, the United Kingdom, Spain, Italy, Argentina, the Netherlands, and Switzerland were the most participatory nations in the first 2 decades of the previous century.
In 1948, the UN General Assembly ratified one of the most important documents in contemporary history, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This international treaty would mark a before and after on the protection of the rights of all people in the world thanks to its characteristic of universality. This also includes minors. 5 years after this, the United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund would be created in order to safeguard the integrity of children against disasters left by World War II.
It is until 1989 where a new writing becomes relevant in terms of children's rights. The Convention of the Rights of the Child is signed and ratified by all the states in the United Nations,
Except for the United States.
and this takes into account the role of children in economy, society, politics, and culture. The Convention establishes that they enjoy human rights and other special rights to strengthen their full development as a socio-political entity.
Currently, the U.S. has tried to prevent the crossing of immigrants from countries such as Mexico and Honduras, among others. Biden's presidency has continued to detain migrant families. Among some people who have taken charge of closely visualizing the new presidential term in the United States have commented that Joe is responsible for the increase in the arrival of undocumented immigrants to the country. With the Trump presidency, there were some restrictions that were severely criticized regarding the treatment of minors in the centers. Some of these conditions have been removed. The government has decided that in these cases where minors arrive without the company of an adult family member, they will not return to Mexico. Therefore, the different cases of this type will be resolved and processed in the United States.
In March of 2021, some photos were published where you could see a center of immigrants on the border of Mexico. This one houses about 1,000 people, which are in deplorable situations, sleeping on blankets improvised by themselves, a place that is not conditioned to offer a dignified stay in what they expect a resolution on their situation in a North American country. The U.S. government has clarified that it wants to seek a working relationship with Guatemala and Mexico to tackle this problem at its root. Observe the situations that lead the population of Central American countries to travel so many kilometers to cross and seek a better quality of life.
A significant number of undocumented children were removed from their families and redirected to various detention centers. The Biden government has explained that it will seek the application of a less aggressive and more humanitarian immigration policy. Although, in evidence of the photos previously published, it was announced that some of these centers will reopen to house these undocumented immigrants in its approach to minors.
Activists and human rights specialists have expressed their opinion on the conditions in which these minors find themselves when they are taken to these detention centers. The amounts and data that are provided are impressive. Around 20,000 undocumented minors are in the charge of the U.S. Department of Health. Most of them are not accompanied by family members or a responsible adult, and around 3,000 children are exposed to situations that put their full development at risk.
Migrant children with an undocumented status on the border between Mexico and the U.S. tend to be subjects that are recipients of psychological, physical, and possibly sexual violence. Immigrant infants are not enjoying their right to priority in accordance with national and international regulations, so it is imperative to make progress on this issue in order to comply with our moral and ethical obligation as a cross-border society.
It is necessary to exert pressure on the state authorities in charge of guaranteeing the rights of children and adolescents. Children, by not having all the protection tools, but still being subjects of law, deserve more rights than adults to satisfy their needs. Youngsters and infants are not recognized as thinking and sentient entities that suffer the absence of their parents, as well as the exploitation of their mental health.
Family unity should always prevail. So separating parents from their children is a crime against human rights, the rights of the migrants and the rights of the child.
It is not possible to be against child migration, as this gives way to racist actions and policies that directly violate the dignity of these children who are not responsible for the actions of their elders.